Hey, you whiskey fans. For a while now, I've had this whiskey over here. This is a black whiskey, and I'll tell you more about what that means. What's interesting is it's a Peruvian whiskey that made its way all the way to Switzerland. I'm really happy that it made its way over. It's been a while since I've tasted it, so I'm really interested to see what it's going to taste like now. Grab a glass, or whatever it is, and let's dive into this. So what's important about this whiskey here is there's many variations of this. And depending on which one you're looking at, that whiskey could have got a whole bunch of awards, or it could be their standard mixer and cocktail whiskey. So be sure not to judge the entire line the same. The distillery is not made up of just one product. There is a vast portfolio of different stuff, including not just whiskeys. They produce a bunch of different spirits. But this one here really stood out to me, and there's a few variations of it. I was able to taste through it at a whiskey event I was at in Switzerland, but this one here was quite interesting as it is a single barrel at barrel strength. That might sound like a lot of goobly gop. What it means is this is not a blend. It came out of one barrel and one barrel only, and they have not added any water to it. Also, it is not colored, so this color that you see here, this super dark rich color, is actually the color of the whiskey itself, and it looks amazing. So looking forward to opening this up and tasting it. Now, some interesting facts about the distillery. Essentially, it is in Peru. They are using Peruvian black corn. I found a couple names for this. They do write it on the bottle itself as well. And I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it's Andean or Andean black corn. Now, what's interesting here is, of course, being Peru, relatively high altitudes, they say that this specific variation of black corn grows very well in these regions. That cork is on it. Whoa, that was a cork. I mean, this is a beast. It's got some girth on it, as well as, of course, a little bit of nice writing on the top. Very interested to taste it. Again, this is the first time I'm popping it and having it. There is a nice little glass. Not the cleanest glass, but look at the job done. So sorry, 60% corn. Then they have about 30% malted wheats. I like the pick. We'll talk about why. And finally, they have 10% barley. Probably just regular malted barley. And it could just be that this is the stuff that they have around. They have a lot of wheat, although I'm not sure if that wheat would be malted. And if anything else, I imagine that the malted wheat is being used primarily for their other products, their vodkas and whatnot. And then what's kind of left over or part of their purchase goes into making this whiskey. Another fact to why I think this, and none of this needs to be true. If you know any better, please drop us a comment and let me know. Just speaking off the top of my head. But they say that this whiskey is double pot stilled. And it being double pot stilled means a few things. For starters, we don't know if this is in the American style of production. By that I mean that it's being mashed, fermented, and then distilled with the grain still being a part of the beer or the mash. So it's like one big soup essentially, or it's like a broth, and that goes into the still. Very hard to do with the pot still, like Iron Root, and there's a few distilleries that do it, but it needs some very specific machinery. And I'm not sure if they have that, versus they are probably straining it like you would in Scotland or as you make a beer. And once they're straining out all of the liquid, this wort then goes, and mash worts is kind of interchangeable, kind of not, but goes into a pot still, which is then heated up by direct heating or steam, whatever, but you're less likely to scorch all the little bits and pieces of grain that you have if you're using the American still or the American method. The reason American method works is they don't use pot stills. And with a pot still, you tend to just distill the liquid. Not always true, but just my guesses here. That means two things. Because they're doing this process, because I imagine they're using pot stills and I imagine that they are distilling off grain, this means that as they are preparing their grain to go into the fermenter, it's been cooked and they're now lautering it and removing the grains from the liquids. It is very, very hard to do this if you are only using corn. So for corn use, usually in the US, they grind corn into like a really, really fine powder. And it's fine. Like it's It's like flour, essentially. And as this flour goes through your mash tun, depending on what your mash tun is, you can cook it, not a problem. When you're trying to remove and separate the grain from the liquid, this then becomes a problem because if you have like a big sieve or some type of filter at the bottom, these fine corn particles are going to clog everything up, and it's not so much fun. It can work. I do it sometimes. But if you're a large distillery, you don't want to be messing with this stuff. And they're decent sized. So I imagine that the use of wheat and barley is in the two parts. One, they get it to make their vodkas and gins. And second part, it's easier for them to process. 60% corn means that they can plus minus call it a corn whiskey. However, not exactly. Having the mash bill of only 60% corn, they're not technically classified as a corn whiskey. For instance, the really well-known Mellow Yellow is corn whiskey. In the US, if you wanted to make corn whiskey, you actually need to have a minimum of 80% corn. So this doesn't justify it. This is not corn whiskey. It's not bourbon because it's not made in the US, but it is using American oak. Sorry for all the talking. I wanted to let this kind of open up and breathe a little bit as 61% alcohol, and it's right there at the top. Super interesting. It has a little bit like a black gum note, but very like dark concentrated sweetness, almost like a molasses. Like a really strong, like a saturated, really, really deep, rich. I like calling it like a gum flavor, almost like it's so powerful, it's almost like artificial. I remember why I bought it. It's good. Again, 61%, I had to let it breathe out. Pretty good finish. What lingers is the sweetness. Still a little bit of that gummy characteristic. That's still in there. It's pretty good. I've seen reviews on not this one particularly, but their regular release saying it's only about 4 years old. This bottle here was actually distilled in 2018. I imagine it went into the barrel also in 2018, and it was bottled 2024, meaning we have roughly a 5 to 6 year old product here. And I have to say, it tastes pretty damn good and pretty in that ballpark. I don't want to say it's been in a very hot climate. It probably hasn't, which probably helped with this flavoring. I've also heard that it's very oaky. I don't think it is. At least this barrel here is not very oaky. It's actually, I'd say, very well balanced. It's a pretty good pick. Coming back to it, I'd like to give it a couple sips, especially as it's such high alcohol. I've also heard notes that it's very grainy. Even I think on their website they say the corn really comes through. Hard to say. I imagine yes, because this doesn't taste anything like other corn whiskeys, or let's say corn forward whiskeys. Like, I don't know if you've had like trolley worms or like those colored worms. They probably all taste the same, but knowing this is black whiskey in it, knowing that one of those worms is green and red or whatever, changes the flavor a little bit. For me, it's in that line. I think the marketing plays a big role on how I taste and how it changes or affects me, but it's good. It's definitely not something you can open up for everybody, especially at 61%, but it's good. And it will impress some people. Almost like a cotton candy flavor on the nose. And it's super candied. It's super rich. Again, like if I had to compare it to a fruit, it'd almost be like a stone fruit or something. It'd definitely be on the darker side. Not so much raisin concentration, but like artificial concentration. Way too high of a concentration to like be considered normal or natural. It is, but crazy. By the way, I love how they spelled whiskey with an E. Sorry, guys. I had 2 glasses here since the beginning, and my idea was to side by side have a sip of the Yellow Mellow, as it's probably one of the closest things I have. I'm sure there's a wheated bourbon back there somewhere, but in all honesty, this is something so unique and such on its own class that a comparison wouldn't really make a lot of sense unless you're using some of like this very similar, or I mean, I do have some blue corn variations, but it's nothing to this concentration, nothing to this power. And being at barrel strength, I think the other ones which I have are just like 45 or 90. It probably would be an unfair comparison. I could water it down, but it's so good like this, I really don't need to. If you go to their website, they recommend adding some drops of water if you want. Making it in a cocktail, so if you've got the regular strength, not the barrel pick, the blended, I could see that being really good in an old fashioned, and that's what they write on their website. I see why it got a bunch of awards and medals. I'm not sure if they would get it continuously year after year, because they probably have a very specific toned in flavor profile. And I can't imagine that this would be very, or let me say this, it'd be really hard to start to finish or play around with. You might get some very special barrels that just age way different than everything else and give you a bunch of different stuff. But I think this, how it is right now, is damn good. I would buy it again as a whiskey enthusiast. I'll probably keep one back on the shelf. I hope this is barrel 582 in case you can somehow get your hands on it. I'd recommend it. Very good stuff. Super happy with the pick. Again, I like weird whiskeys. If you even like normal bourbons or you're somewhere on the fence, sometimes you like a rum. This is not like a rum. It's not like over synthetic or over like metallic-y sweet notes. It is super sweet, but it really sits somewhere well on the balance. Still more in the direction of whiskey, but it's even more than like a whiskey finished in a rum barrel. It's pretty special. Pretty good stuff. Cheers. I hope you liked my little rant. I hope you liked the kind of the background on why I think the mash bill is what it is, and from a production standpoint, why it makes sense to me that they would do this. Otherwise, they're spending a lot of money on machinery, and there's not a lot of pictures that I could find off their website, but the only few, like really disco-themed ones, which I did. Top right corner, you see this still, and I imagine this is the pot still that they're using, and probably the other stills which they have around the place are being used for making their gins and vodkas and other products, because they need to call them still for that. It makes sense. I'm really happy that they're not doing it all in the same still, because I do feel like no matter how good you clean this stuff, there is always a little bit of contamination. I don't know if you taste it because the corn here is so strong, but I'm happy. Cheers to you. To the next time. Bye now.